Hi, and welcome to the National New Teacher Support Podcast brought to you by New Teacher University. This is a podcast for teachers, by teachers, and I'm your principal and host, Dr. Terry Ross. I'm so excited to have you with us, new teachers, for this experience this morning. This podcast is so exciting. I have with me an award-winning teacher that started their own consulting firm, the Energized Educator, Mr. Roderick Johnson. He is the CEO of the Energized Educator. And today he's going to talk with us about being the CEO of your own classroom. Because new teachers, one of the things that you have to understand, you're already a leader. You're leading 15, 20, 30 children a day already. So you can go on and stop saying, well, I don't like this talk in front of people. You're talking in front of people every day. You are a leader in that classroom. The children are dependent on you and the parents are dependent on you. And you are capable and can do it. And that's what the National New Teacher Support Podcast is all about, bringing you strategies that you can use, strategies that you can put to the test right away and get results. So thank you for joining us again. And today, again, we have with us Mr. Roderick Johnson. He's the CEO of the Energized Educator. And today he's going to be talking with us about being the CEO of your own classroom. So, Mr. Johnson, will you please introduce yourself and tell us, why did you start the Energized Educator?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Roderick Johnson, as he mentioned before. I started the Energized Educator because, number one, I'm a ball of energy, right? I believe that energy can be transferred. It's never lost. I believe that we should transfer energy to our new teachers because they are really our most vulnerable population because they carry the legacy of the educational mantle. So I thought it was interesting to take all of the things that I learned as a new teacher that made me an award-winning teacher and transfer it back to new teachers to make sure that their energy continues to go and they feed their energy to our students.
Thank you so much. Now, I can tell that you are a ball of energy because you just jumped right into it. Now, tell us who you are. Tell us
So
about your career.
absolutely. So in 2018, I was awarded a award for outstanding teaching in Baltimore. I was awarded by Joy Baltimore. They call it the Legendary Award. So I became legendary in teaching in 2018. Then after that, I decided that I wanted to be a teacher mentor and I wanted to be a coach. So I talked to my principal and I went back to school to get my admin degree. And from that, I got an internship where I literally help teachers manage their foundational literacy data. And we made big trends. We realized that in kindergarten, the skills weren't transferring to first grade. So we did a big in-depth analysis about that. Then after that, in 2021, I became a literacy coach with Baltimore City Public Schools. Thus, I also started my first business venture called the Johnson Experience, now Energized Educators. But I started that adventure in 2021, and now I build instructional coaches capacity so they can transform their teachers from ordinary to legendary.
So, thank you, Mr. Johnson, for sharing that and sharing your journey with us. So, tell me, what does it mean to be the CEO of your classroom?
I'm glad you asked. So the CEO is literally the person that controls every facet of the classroom. The first thing is really about that instructional confidence. How are you showing up to your classroom? Are you showing up passively or are you showing up aggressively? And I don't mean aggressively as in you have to be in charge of everything, but are you really taking initiative in that classroom to make sure your students have the best possible experience? Are you using data? What does your management look like? What does your equity look like? What are those systems that you have in your classroom? Those are the things that make you a CEO of your classroom.
And thank you for saying that. And I like that you clarified when you said aggressive, because you meant being aggressive about your craft.
Absolutely.
You really, and I heard that. And we have to be intentional about what it is that we're doing. And that's one of my words for 2024 is to be more intentional about me and what I'm
Absolutely.
doing, because what you put into anything is what you get out of it. So I appreciate you sharing that, because that's all about planning. That's all about just really getting to know your students and knowing the environment that you're in.
Absolutely.
So
And you should know what's next. right? A good CEO knows the plan. So strategic planning is definitely, long range plan is what we call it in education, but that is part of being the CEO because you need to always know what's next.
I love that because I was reading something about being an expert and being a coach. And all you need to do to be a coach or to be the expert, if you were reading a book, just be 2 chapters ahead
Absolutely.
of the group. So you
Absolutely.
know what's next. So that
Absolutely.
fits, and that's understanding, looking at misconceptions and things like that. So you're exactly right. To be a leader, you should always be a few steps ahead, but also being open and vulnerable in the process for those things that's going to present itself. So if I walked into a classroom where the teachers say, I'm the CEO of this classroom, what would that look like?
Absolutely. So it looks like everybody's working in a community. It's not lecture in traditional desk face in the front. It's more of a community. So I'll take you back a time when I was in a classroom. I had 4 small groups. I had a parent leading a small group. I had a student leading a small group. I had partners leading a small group. And then I had my small group. So as the CEO, I am able to get up from that group, monitor what's happening, and then come back to that group because everybody has been set to work. Everybody knows the plan. Everybody knows the strategy. It's not just about the objective that you give the students. It's about the follow through and how we'll all be tested at the end. Even the teacher has to be tested because an assessment is not just student facing. It's also teacher facing because you want to make sure you give the right direction. You want to make sure you give the right support. You want to make sure you give the right scaffold and also release those scaffolds. So it's all about you really bringing that community together and creating an enhanced experience to make sure that everybody gets to the end goal that is required by the teacher.
So my next question, we were supposed to go into the 3 strategies. You told me that there are 3 strategies, but you just said something really huge that we need to unpack.
Sure.
How do you get to that community? Because you talked about everyone, they'll know their roles, they know what they're supposed to do, they know what the end result is supposed to look like. That takes time. Could you just take a little while and unpack that for new teachers so that they'll know that that didn't happen overnight, that Roderick Johnson didn't just walk into his classroom and he was able to get that award and become legendary? What did that journey look like for you to get to this point where you kind of put together a model of what this looks like? But you had to have those pieces in place first before you could just have a parent in your classroom helping the group, because that takes training and understanding. And then you had children that in charge of groups, classmates. So that took some training and understanding. Unpack that for us, please.
So believe it or not, it's really data, and we'll get to data in a minute. But really, you have to know who's walking through your threshold. So those first 4 weeks of school are crucial, and you want to get to know everybody. You want to be overtly in the community, expressing yourself and letting them know your vision and your mission for your students. I know that we have crowded classrooms, but that is not an excuse for you to not give the children their experience they deserve. What you do is you look for strategies and find ways and find a mentor or somebody that can lead you in a direction, and you learn those people. You learn who's walking in your room. You learn who might have an issue with some sort of behavior, or who's not getting the most love at home, or who might need some more support in terms of getting motivated. You learn that, and then you craft that into strategy, because some people don't, like, for example, some people don't want a lecture. So those students are your leaders. Those students are those that most likely know the content that can help you express it to other students. So that's how I got that student group. That parent that's a quote unquote hover mother that always wants to be around their child, that's your volunteer. That's your volunteer because they want to be there anyway, but they just need something else to do. And then that group that can and that like to be independent, you want to make sure you honor that, because we don't want to tear a child down because we want them to be like us. We want to really play on their strong suits, and that is what helps you create that experience in that classroom. But it takes about 4 to 6 weeks to learn that, the first couple weeks of school, and then once you got it, you are transforming them literally from dependent to independent.
So that's where you're going slow to go fast. It looks as if you're
Absolutely.
making some mistakes. It looks as if you're not even moving some days, but you're building relationships. And that's what relationships look like. Even in our personal lives, they look a little messy in the beginning, but they're going to get there. Now, you said something that was really profound to me. You said some students don't want to listen to lectures, but then you went on to say that those are your leaders.
Yes.
Now, most people will look at those students who are fidgeting and being busy when they're lecturing as they're unmotivated, they're uninterested, they don't want to be a part of it. What made you look at those students as the students that are leaders, and those are the ones that you needed to leverage?
Really, because they were me. When I was in school, I don't like to read. Or let me say this. I did not like to read when I was in school. I could literally open a book, get to the beginning, read a page from the beginning, get a middle and the end, and I got the book and I got the content. So I didn't want to sit through a 20-minute lecture. I wanted to apply. I wanted application. And I had a class with 24 boys who wanted application. But unfortunately, I was in a district where I felt like I needed to lecture. I wasn't a CEO yet. I had a district where they felt like I needed to lecture. I became a CEO when I started incorporating stuff to help them with their lecture. So I gave them Legos because they were math guys and I was a literacy person. If anybody knows about math and engineering go hand in hand. Yes. So while I'm lecturing and they're listening, they're creating cities and villages out of Legos. So that number one, I got a product after the lesson. And number two, now when it's time to apply, I have not only a city that will match the story, but also I have the work that they complete after the lesson because they were able to apply while they had to sit through my lecture.
Yes, it is a known fact that the best educators are the ones who were sometimes the worst students.
Absolutely, because
I can raise my hand. I was not just a horrible student, but school was somewhat painful for me, and at moments in my life, probably most of it. Because of the sitting in the desk, the lecture, the growing pains are real. And boys especially, because boys have big play movements. We don't sit down when we're young and imagine like little things like teacups and stuff. We're imagining dinosaurs and trucks and, all kinds of, just huge things and playing sports. At least that's what we're programmed to. And then we're asked at a certain age to go sit in a chair, look at a board and write.
Absolutely. And then some of us come to the table with different problems. Like me, I was going through an identity issue. I didn't know who I was. Here I am coming from one mother to another mother. So you telling me to sit down, but I don't know what that means. I don't know how to school. And then I went from county to city. So the county does stuff very different than the city. So realistically, and we're going to go into data in a second, but realistically, it's all about how well you know your people and what they're actually going through, and that will trigger a response for you. And the biggest thing and the most astronomical thing that you can do for a child is literally ask them what they want.
You're really giving some huge leadership lessons here today as a CEO, and you're doing it from a teacher seat. So thank you so much. So let's move on into it. What are the strategies to becoming the CEO of your classroom?
So I'm going to talk about data, I'm going to talk about management, and I'm going to talk about equity.
Okay, let's get into data then. How does data help you drive being a CEO in your classroom?
Absolutely. You got to know what your team can do. You got to know, and it's not just assessment data. It's not just the test scores that we all know what they're going to be. It's also observable data. What are you observing? How was the student arriving at the instruction? First of all, how many times have they arrived to the instruction late? How many times have they arrived to the instruction and they weren't there? And I'm not talking about just general absence. I mean, they were there, but there was a void over them. They didn't participate, right? They didn't jump in the lecture. They did not understand the content. Those things you need to notice because those students didn't become, those behavior problems. And I hate to say behavior problems, but they do because they're lost. Yeah. The more lost they become, the more they try to escape it. And we know this as adults. When we don't like something, we can get up and go. But children don't have that opportunity. So if you notice that the test scores are low, right? And you notice they're arriving in instruction often unprepared, or the contrary, if you know the test scores are high and you know your instruction is not very high and they become a behavior problem, you have to manage that. You have to figure out who gets what piece of information at what time, which is why my groups were so successful, because I knew exactly how I could push them.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew when I can pull back. But one thing I see teachers doing that I think that we should stop doing is over scaffolding. That is the conversation that we're not having. Everybody doesn't need a scaffold. Some people need productive struggle. Some people need to go through it and understand that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I know you and I have been through some stuff and we didn't like it when we went through it, but when we got over it, we felt so much better.
It's just what
So
we
it's
needed.
not just about, right, it's not just about test scores, right? That's one part. Of course, you want to analyze your test scores, but you want to analyze your test scores, the writing. What does it look like? Are they crafting sentences correctly? Are they using grammar, usage, and mechanics? I know new teachers probably don't even know about gum, but grammar, usage, mechanics. Are they using cuts, capitalization, underlining, punctuation? Are they using those things? And what do they look like when they approach this work? How do they come to school? Are they coming to school energized like me, or are they reserved? What observable data? And then what they do with other teachers. Because resource to me was a hot spot. When they got the resource, my students were a whole different type of people. So what am I saying in my classroom that allows them to go to another teacher and do something less than the standard? That's a CEO.
You use both qualitative and quantitative data,
Absolutely.
and I like that you really talked about more qualitative data than anything,
Absolutely.
because even in your introduction, you made it very clear that being a leader in your classroom is really about the people. It's about
Absolutely.
the children. We can drive for test scores all day, but you're not going to get test scores without people. And that's not just the students, that's their parents. You do need to know a little something about their home life. And you
You
can
do.
find that out through the stories that you read, through the interest inventory that you give at the beginning. There are just little things that happens that can tell you little things about the children, how they walk in the classroom. And I also like you talked about how they come in the classroom. We can change that state.
Mm-hmm.
It's how we are energized. And I'm sure many days you saw students come in and you said, oh, they're not ready today. Let me do this to get
Yes.
them, to activate them.
And I want to share, it's not just about this little handshake. I don't want to say little because that's not nice, but it's not about the handshake when they walk in the door. That's one part. But again, what vision and mission are you sharing with these students when they walk in? Mine was, we don't do excuses in here. And I taught first grade on up. We don't do excuses. If you have a problem, you ask for grace. If you're having a bad day, you ask for grace and you sit out. But when you sit out, just know that when you go to gym, we have to finish this content, because how am I going to make you the next president? How am I going to make you the next Beyonce? How am I going to make you the next Terry if I can't get you where you need to go? So it was an understanding that we had, right? Because I'm the CEO and you are a part of this community. You were handpicked. And that's what I told my children. You are handpicked to be a part of this community, because we know what principals do. Black men are behavior specialists. So I was a behavior specialist. So you are handpicked to be here. And my job is to make sure that your experience is not only top tier, but it gives you that transferable habit of mind where you can go anywhere and be successful. That's the mission. And if I'm uncomfortable, that means I'm doing something right. If I'm comfortable, that means that I'm not teaching to the best of my ability, and my CEO card should be revoked.
Yes, you just elevated something in there about Black men being viewed as behavior specialists, disciplinarians, and it's almost a struggle sometimes to be that intellectual leader, that academic
Absolutely.
leader, that instructional leader, because the expectations are for you to just come in and handle the children. You can't handle the children without there being structures and systems in places for the children to operate in. And in order to do that, you need to be an intellectual. You need to be an instructional leader. You can't go in just with brawn and brute to make that happen. You have to go in with some scholarship. So thank you for elevating that. And sometimes it causes a little cognitive dissonance for people when you're
like,
doing
whoa,
that.
whoa, you smart too? Whoa. But it goes to that second point. If you would allow me to
Yes.
jump to that one, it goes to that management piece. And so I'm gonna say something controversial, and it's okay. I'm a Virgo. Okay, so Virgos are very type A, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But I'm gonna also say this: you don't need to be a Virgo to be this way. You just have to have systems. So from your data, how are you going to use the data if you're not managing it? What flow is your data? Okay, so Terry walks in with an attitude. I should know what to do next. Oh, first of all, he might not have had breakfast. So I might ask him, did you have breakfast? Yes, I had breakfast. Okay, so let's have a conversation on the side. Let's manage this here. And again, while I manage it, the expectation in the classroom is that everybody is set to work. So while I'm talking to him in the morning, I've already got something on your desk to, number one, give me a data point. Number two, to get you activated and get your mind ready. And number three, it reflects our objectives for the day.
So new teachers, what just happened here is the CEO, Mr. Roderick Johnson, just transitioned us from his first strategy of using data to moving into the management piece. But it was so seamless because he used the data. He brought the data right into the management piece because it's all connected.
It all connected.
So let's move on with strategy 2 and the management of being a CEO.
Absolutely. So also, you got to figure out what systems work for you. Okay. I'm type A. Sometimes some things don't work for me, and you got to figure out your type. But what really is the beautiful piece is when you explain your systems, not only to your students, but to those that visit your room, because you are the CEO. So they're doing a visit. I don't care if it's admin, district. You need to try to explain those systems to them. From one big system in my room that I stand firm on was the organization of my room. It was one way in and one way out. Literally, it was a circle. So, and all my desk faced me until it was time to break out. We moved desks like every 5 seconds. But the reason why, number one, it was organization. They could see me. I could see them. I don't have to deal with behavior because you're facing me. Number two, I didn't like to talk. I don't like to talk at children. Sit down, be quiet. I don't do that. So one of my systems was a gavel. One rap means to be quiet. Two means to stand up. Three means to line up. Again, I'm cutting down on teacher talk. I'm cutting down on making sure that students understand where I stand. And guess what? That teaches them structure. Because I never had a child that did not comply with the gavel. They actually loved it. They loved it. That's that management piece. I'm not talking about behavior management, friends. I am talking about literally the management of your space and the management of your data.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that piece. Now, that sounds very structured, but it's structured. What the new teachers need to understand is that in between the gavel, I hope you heard, he said we move our desk every 5 seconds. So the students are not sitting there in between the gavel. They are engaged in groups, or either they're engaged, it's teacher to student, student to student, or student to text. They know exactly what they're doing in between the gavel. So in between the gavel is not a quiet space. It's they're engaged with each other. If they're quiet, it's because they're on a piece that they're working on.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize the reason why you have to explain your system to people that visit your classroom, because everybody's not going to understand. But that's what a CEO does. Everybody doesn't understand the CEO, and that's that aggressive part, because you got to stand firm in what you're doing because only you know the vision. Right? Only you know the end result of your work. But again, you have to plan it and you have to manage it. So the reason why the gavel came in, because I realized I was talking too much. So now my management system for me trying to figure out how to talk too much is to find something that will make a sound that would allow students to understand where I am and make a cue that would allow them to do it without talking. Because students, if you got a lot of them in a room, and I had more than 30, if you have a lot of them in the room, there's going to be a lot of talking.
Yes.
So that was my people talk too much. So from the observable data, they talk too much because they didn't like to write. So now we got to figure out how to fix that. So now I got to go to my manager. How am I going to manage that my people don't like to write? Okay, I got it. First part is I'm going to get them a lecture so they can use their Legos. Second, now I need you to pick up your pencil, and I need you to start with me. And then lastly, you're going to start in your group because that is the management system that I had in my room. And it worked for me. But then when people come to the door, they want to know why you're not lecturing, because I told you I was in a lecturing space. They want to know why you're not lecturing. And then when they're there, you defend your system.
Yes, yes.
And if it works,
people who are astute at observations, you don't have to explain it to them, because when they see the rotation, when they see the management, they know exactly what's going on. They know exactly what's happening. Seldom do I have to ask a question about what's happening in a classroom. True. Seldom, because once I stay for a minute, if I have a question, all I need to do is stand a little longer, and I can see that, okay, this is just how they manage that piece. But when I have to ask a question, I love the fact that a teacher is able to explain why they're doing what they're doing. So go on.
I just want to also say, new teachers, also, everybody has a family member or something you had to manage. Birthday party, bar mitzvah, church function. Everybody had to manage something. Take that into your classroom your first year. Treat your classroom as if it's that successful function that you already had, because you already was the CEO of something. You already, if you carried that collection plate in Sunday school, you are the CEO of that collection plate. What did you do in your mind that made sure you got up, you got dressed, you talked to your mentor said go straight down the aisle, or maybe you volunteered. What did you do? Maybe you're in an organization. What did they do? Take all of that to your classroom, because honestly, that is what will fuel you. And when you create non-negotiables for yourself, you become a legendary teacher, and you can do it in your first year. Absolutely. It does not take 4 or 5 years for you to become legendary. That is a myth, because the kids deem you. The administration doesn't. The kids that come back and say, thank you for pushing me. Or like in my situation where a kid came in upset, and I checked my kids. I said, what is wrong with you? He said, my mother tried to tell me she taught me how to read, and you taught me how to read. That's legend. To me, I'm good with that.
So that's your evaluation score right there. It didn't matter what the district gave you.
I don't care. And I call it the coin capture sheet. I don't care what's on the coin capture sheet, because I just got my raise right there. It wasn't monetary, but it told me that my data systems was good. It told me my management was good. And when I talk about equity, it also told me that I was walking in equity, and I was efficacious in what students needed.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So that takes us to our last strategy, which was equity. Thank you for sharing that. That takes us to our last strategy, which was equity. So how does a CEO manage equity or implement equity or make sure that it's in the classroom?
I just put it like this. Give them what they need, not what you think they need, not what you assume they need, not extra scaffolds, not extra differentiation. Give them what they need. I don't know if you saw the through line of equity, but I started with saying that my boys were restless.
Yes.
They needed something. And guess what? I did too. I went from I had a name change, right? I had a systems change. I needed something too. Everybody also doesn't need the same thing. And I'm sorry, new teachers, I'm going to say this. If you have 30 students that need 30 different things, give them 30 different things and go back to that manage piece and figure out how you management, and then think about the data that assumes that, so that you can be able to full circle that moment. And then when you have a conversation with the people that are in charge, you tell them what you did, you document it, and that is when you become a CEO. Because now, guess what? The next year, You already ready. You already ready because I know that little Terry's brother's coming. And most likely, if he needed breakfast in the morning, his brother's gonna need breakfast in the morning. If little Roderick's coming, I know his handwriting might not be the best, so I'm gonna help him with handwriting. And then all your groups becomes pods of innovation, curiosity, and it's efficacious because everyone is getting what they need. Now, I'm not talking about reading levels. Let's be clear. I'm not talking about taking stuff away. For example, we like to, oh, they can't read this, so I'm gonna go 2 grades below. No, that's not efficacy, and that's not equity. And the reason why is because now I'm taking your educational right away from you because I feel like you can't do it. That's learned helplessness. That's how you create that continuum. What you do is you say, maybe you can't read this whole article, but you're gonna read this sentence. And I'm gonna help you echo this sentence because that is what you need. But you don't need excuses, right? You don't need 2 or 3 scaffolds. You don't need a lot of stuff. You just need whatever will help you push, whatever will help you get into that productive struggle and swim and not sink.
I had a moment when you opened this piece when you said equity is giving them what they need. That's and new teachers, he said, if you have 30 students and they need 30 different things, you give them what they need. You can do that in one lesson and you don't need 30 different lesson plans.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean that you reduce and modify down.
Yes.
It means that you understand, you've gotten to know your students. You understand who they are and what they need, and you give that to them in that one lesson.
Yeah.
What I need may be for when you ask, when it's my time to read and round robin, that you prompt the class to not jump in and help me because you know that I need that productive struggle.
That's it.
And you've built the type of classroom where there's no one laughing when you give me that productive struggle, that there's encouragement.
Yeah.
What another student may need is that you don't call on them today at all because they already have it, but they are facilitating something else for you because they may feel like, well, you're calling on me too much. And because some kids sometimes feel like they're called on all the time to cause them problems among their other classmates.
Yeah, and that's where equity sticks came from.
That's where equity sticks come in, absolutely. So just making sure that we know that all students are getting what they need. And I used to say it because my background is special ed, I would meet my students where they were.
Yeah, and you know, another thing, and I like to talk about the students that are lower, but I also like to talk about the students that are higher. Yes. So I'm an instructional coach daily, in addition to running my business. And one thing I pitched was hybrid education, right? And so I walked into a teacher's classroom and I realized there are 5 students that were not engaged. I'm like, well, what is going on with them? And so I look at their scores are high. But again, they're not engaged. I'm like, what is wrong? So our district purchased an online version of our curriculum that gives you the instructional video. So what did I do? Those 5 that weren't engaged in their lesson, put them on that video and see what they do. They outperformed themselves on the national test.
You accelerated them. And sometimes
I gave them what they needed.
Yes, acceleration is equity. You don't, when you drop down, that's not equity, but acceleration is. And I love that you said you do not go 2 grade levels down, because if I can learn a 2nd grade word, I can learn a 4th grade word in the 4th grade. I don't have to be in the 4th grade learning the 2nd grade word.
Absolutely.
Give me that 4th grade word. And if I can learn that 2nd grade word, I can learn that 4th grade word. And how you get those 2nd grade words in me, you send those at home in the evening on a flashcard.
But it is even more bigger than that. It's even more bigger. It's even bigger than that. Sorry, I do teach English. It's even bigger than that, because think about it. When they go to do that state testing, are they getting 2nd grade words or 4th grade words?
Absolutely.
So now you just push them back and you messed up. Oh, wait, your data. Now your management is off because now you got to manage how that works. So it's all flowing together. But new teachers, I want you to understand that you have to do what you know to do.
Yes. Yes.
You're going to have a lot of coaches that are going to try to support you, which is what you need. But again, like I said before, you have done something in your life where you had data management and you were able to provide for those people, and you need to remember that and implement that, because you got to remember that these students are going to eventually be alone for an assessment that you can't help them with. So what are you giving them for them to be able to swim, not sink? And they should go in there with so much confidence that they're doing a test looking like this. Your working class is harder than this. That's how they should arrive. But it's up to you. Yes. And you can do it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I taught students with learning disabilities. And like you said, on the test, if they're fourth grade, they're not going to be given a second grade test. Nope. So because I was high school, I would tell my students, there's not going to be a learning disabilities department in life. You're going to be out there with everyone else. So I had them reading full-scale novels.
Yeah.
Like Nathan McCall, Make Me Want to Holler.
Yeah.
The Fire Next Time. You know, books like that, that you're going to read this, and they were able to give book reports on it. And those students are out doing very well now, graduated with regular diplomas. No one ever knew that I taught special ed because I never approached the work like that. Same and my here. Students understood that, and they understood that my expectations for them were the expectations for all other students. So thank you so much for sharing these 3 strategies. This has just been awesome. We first talked about data. We then talked about management. And then we talked about equity. And those are the 3 strategies for being the CEO of your classroom: knowing your data, having equity-centered classroom, and knowing the management. And there's a through line with all 3. So Mr. Johnson, would you like to tell them what that through line would be, if there was like one word or one statement that you could say that would help them understand what being the CEO of their classroom is like? How would you encapsulate that?
It's about being energized.
I love it.
And keep the energy, because again, energy is never lost. It's transferred. So stay energized, educators.
Stay energized and stay encouraged, because energy is not lost. And if you're putting out hopeless energy, if you're putting out helpless energy, if you're putting out defeated energy, that's what's going to come back to you. So stay energized, stay encouraged, and you can do this. Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson, the CEO of Energized Educator, for joining us on the National New Teacher Support Podcast, brought to you by New Teacher University. New teachers, thank you so much. I know you got a lot of gems out of this. I know that this is going to help you. Again, thank you for joining us on the National New Teacher Support Podcast, brought to you by New Teacher University, the podcast for teachers, by teachers. And I'm your principal and host, Dr. Terry Ross. And again, we want to thank Mr. Roderick Johnson for joining us today on how to be the CEO of your classroom. Thank you.